we're going to cover the two empires that ruled after the Sumerians were defeated. We're going to talk about the Babylons and the Assyrians. Now, where we left off yesterday, the Sumerians were ruling the Mesopotamian region. Eventually, due to a population shift, there wasn't enough farmland to supply the Sumerian people. As a result, a new group comes into the Mesopotamian region and begins to take over little bit by little bit. This group is known as the Babylons. Eventually, they defeat all of Sumerians. They are led by their king by the name of Hammurabi. We'll talk about Hammurabi in a later unit though. The Babylons lead at their peak from 1800 BCE to 1600 BCE or before Common Era. Babylons are most famous for two main things. They are known for their caravans. This is a group of travelers that traded. The caravans were different in Babylon because they were willing not only to stay in the Mesopotamian region, but they were willing to go outside the Mesopotamian region with their caravans and trade with other groups as well, not just inside the region. We still have caravans today. Caravans today are a large amount of vehicles that travel in a line or together to get to your sporting events, to get to your events that you participate in a daily life with a big group of people. They are also famous for something called a bazaar. A bazaar is a trade market. It is where a centrally located area where multiple groups in the Mesopotamian region and outside the Mesopotamian region could have come together and traded with other groups. Today this is known as the flea market or the farmer's market. Today the flea market, it's a centrally located area where multiple groups come in and trade or buy goods from other groups of people. The Babylons though, their reign is only 200 years. And the reason why it was only 200 years is because Babylon decided that they wanted to make their empire so big that their people just could not control it anymore. As a result, it crumbled. Now, it took some time. It took about 1,000 years for the next big group to come in. This next big group was known as the Assyrians. The Assyrians ruled at its peak from 665 to 612 before Common Era. It's located directly to the north of Babylon. They set in stone a leader by the name of King Sargon II. They are known as the war machine. The reason they are known as the war machine is because they would basically conquer anybody and everybody they can with the use of archers. What archers are people with bows and arrows that would shoot either in the air or down the ground from the city walls. And it was basically like a turkey shoot, one by one by one by one. And the people who they were conquering were not ready for it. But because they were willing to conquer anybody, the people who they often conquered were oftentimes rebellion or going against the power of the Assyrians. Two of the main groups that were successful in going against the Assyrians eventually overthrew the Assyrians. This group is the Medes and the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans and the Medes decided that they wanted to set up a new Babylonian empire, like the Babylons had before the Assyrians. They set up a new leader called Nebuchadnezzar II. Nebuchadnezzar II is probably the most famous person of the empires of Mesopotamia. Nebuchadnezzar II comes up with a famous monument called the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It is famous. Nebuchadnezzar is famous for his hanging gardens and what he did for Babylon. Now, we're going to leave the Assyrians and the Babylons later and how they collapsed. Eventually the Persians took down Babylon again. But we're going to save that for the Greece unit and why the Persians were successful then. But this ends the empires of Mesopotamia. We have talked about the Babylons. We have talked about the Assyrians. We've talked about Sargon and Nebuchadnezzar. We have talked about why each group was successful. And we talked about even the Medes and the Chaldeans and what they did to set up a new Babylonian empire. This ends the Empires of Mesopotamia lesson for today.